I'm Liam.
I'm Wayne.
You're listening to In Film We Trust YouTube.
A place where we post clips from our recent episode.
All links down below in the description.
And now, on with the show.
You know how we often on this podcast talk about independent films, independent so much. Is there any more independent than El Mariachi?
I don't think so. It's like the independent film to end independent films, isn't it?
Not only was it an independent film, what they tried to sell to a mainstream distributor, it was actually first taken to the home video market, believe it or not.
It was originally intended for the Mexican home video market. I guess being that cheap, being from someone who wasn't a big name at the time, I guess they thought there wouldn't be much demand for it, but then Columbia got hold of it and they actually really liked it.
They did, and self-financed, Dwayne.
It was self-financed. Do you know how Robert Rodriguez raised the money to make this film?
Drug experiments.
I've done that before, you know.
You've done medical experiments?
In Australia I did, because he did, I think it was for...
cholesterol,
yes.
drugs.
I did drugs for blood pressure.
Oh.
It's great because you just stay in a lab for however long.
Did you feel ill?
No, I felt fine, actually. Everyone's like, did parts of you fall off? Like, no, I was fine.
Because Robert Rodriguez was paid $100 per day. How much were you paid?
For a month, 3,600 Australian dollars.
Which in sterling?
Maybe a bit less than 3,000, maybe.
3,000 quid for the month?
Something like that, yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, well, I was a guinea pig, so...
I mean, we can notice the side effects, but I suppose the 3,000's worth it.
Ouch. But yeah.
But he raised, actually, the budget was 9,000, but... in true fastidious ways, he actually managed to film this for 7,000.
Yeah, he actually came under budget because he actually ended up using less film. Despite the fact that, obviously, he had limited resources, he used less film than he was intending.
I think with post-production, because you said Columbia picked this up.
Yeah.
And I think in post-production, did the cost not inflate to about 200,000?
It went up to about 200,000, I guess, with things like processing, because Robert Rodriguez himself said he estimated it would have cost him only about 600 if he didn't have to pay for the film and the processing costs.
16mm were filmed on?
16mm, yes.
And as you said, to avoid all this costs, what they did, they transferred the film reel, the 16mm, to video. And they edited that way. Rather than cutting the film, they cut video.
Which would have been less expensive.
Less expensive, yes.
Because when you do research about this film, there's tons of fascinating information about it. Pretty much all of it centers around how did they manage to do this with so little money, just how frugal Rodriguez was and the clever little techniques he used. I think it's an inspiring story, if nothing else, how he got this made.
Well, considering a year prior to El Mariachi, in 91, I think he made a short film called Bedhead, which was a family fantasy type black and white film. And I think it was an award winner, small awards, minor awards, nothing huge, but you can see this gestation with filmmakers where they'll kind of weave their way through short films, experimenting, and then obviously into El Mariachi.
He did actually refer to the making of El Mariachi as practice.
Oh, that's a good word you use there, because throughout this film, did you find that it was almost like a filmmaker with nothing to lose, so they're experimenting with all different type of techniques?
Yeah, because there was a lot in this, but again, when you watch it, you kind of think, is he just doing that to save money? But do you almost feel like as the film went on, it almost got better, because it was shot sequentially, wasn't it?
It was sequentially, as you said, and interestingly, Rodriguez came from this background, as we just mentioned. Did you see at the start of the film, one of the production companies was Los Hooligans?
Los Hooligans, yeah.
Which was the name of his comic strip he made.
Oh, was it?
Los Hooligans,
I always thought that was thrown as like a joke.
No, it was the name of his comic strip, which was inspired by his family, because I think he's got 10 siblings.
Does he?
Yes.
Oh, okay then.
Large family, Wayne.
Oh, that is a pretty large family, yeah.
He could have cast them all and done it in less money.
To be fair, to save money, I'm surprised he didn't do that, because most of the people in this film, they were either not professionals, or they were just small-time actors, or they were just random people who just kind of served a function in the film.
Or there was no behind-the-scenes film crew.
No, there wasn't.
There was no clapperboard, for example.
Yeah, I've got here, he produced it, wrote it, edited, directed, did the photography. The only thing pretty much that he didn't do was act, and he said the only reason he didn't act in it is because then there would have been nobody to hold the camera.
That's logistical, Wayne.
That's fantastic. Just the idea of him with his camera and like a boom mic and just all of this stuff.
Do you not love that independent spirit?
I love that. That's great. That's going out and doing something because you really want to, because you have the passion, not because a studio hired you and gave you money to do it, because this is the story he wanted to tell, and you just, damn it, he went out there and did it.
And it looks a lot more expensive than 7,000. excellent.
I thought the cinematography was very good for a movie with this little a budget. It looks really damn good.
Because he claims that part of the reason he made an action film is shooting action inherently makes the film look more of a larger budget. Mm-hmm. So he was going to try and con the distributors by saying, look, this is a $40,000 picture.
Uh-huh.
And it does, do you think you could pass it off as a $40,000?
Look, if you told me that this cost $7,000, I wouldn't have believed you. I'd said, again, not your $1 million movies, but I'd have said it cost more than that. It was actually a Guinness record holder. It was the lowest budgeted movie to gross $1 million.
It made $2 million at the box office.
$2 million at the box office,
2 million.
Yeah, and essentially launched his career, because it also came out, was it 92?
Yes.
Same year as Reservoir Dogs, of course.
Dogs.
Tarantino, who would go on to collaborate.
As we explained in the Planet Terror episode, this is kind of where they met, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. They built this lifelong friendship.
Well, especially like when you think independent films, the beginning of the 90s, was
yeah.
a boom period, as we covered in when we talked about
Swingers.
When we talked about Swingers. It was
the
a
whole
boom
indie boom.
Exactly. And this became the opening of his Mexico trilogy.
The Mexico trilogy, which was this, Desperado, and eventually Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
Films I've yet to see, but I'm looking forward to. Interestingly, some characters from this appear in Desperado, but cameos in dream sequences, as far as I'm aware.
Well, the star of this film is Carlos Gallardo. He's
also a co-producer of the film.
Co-producer? Mm-hmm. Well, he was childhood friends with Robert Rodriguez.
He's collaborated on that as well.
University friends.
Yeah, because he was also in Planet Terror, but I didn't recognize him at the time.
Yeah, but Carlos Gallardo, as I said, mariachi. In the sequels, he's been replaced by Antonio Banderas.
Oh, is Banderas his character?
Yes.
Oh, so yeah, he doesn't play the same character again.
No.
Oh, okay.
Would you wish they kept him just to...
I do, because I liked his performance.
He was good at it,
He was really good, yeah. Also, because Rodriguez wrote the script in English, and it was Gallardo who translated it into Spanish.
He did. Colloquial Spanish.
Colloquial Spanish, yeah.
Yes, get it right, Wayne.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Because it was filmed in, I think, Acuna, Mexico, which is very close to the Texan border. So I'm guessing Rodriguez, having that kind of crossover with family heritage and such.
Well, of course, the surname, he's of Mexican-American origin.
Mm-hmm. Also, did you know that this movie had absolutely no storyboards at all?
No storyboards?
Because there was no crew members to show them to.
Do you know what, interestingly also?
Yes.
They didn't film sound.
They didn't know.
They did not film sound.
No, it was a weird technique where they filmed the actors performing, then they filmed the sound separate, and they tried to sync it up.
Yeah, because you would think, they would just do that in a studio, but no, they shot the scene, and then shot the scene again without visuals, and they're just acting it.
Yeah.
But it's a weird process, because you think it's almost just like synced up in a studio, but it wasn't.
Yeah. It's like you're trying to imitate what you've seen on screen and try and make everything match up. That would have been difficult
You're
to
essentially
do.
acting out the scene again, but just for audio.
Yeah. But I'll be honest, watching this, there was never a moment I thought, oh, that's badly out of sync. It did sync up very well.
That could be because you were looking at the subtitles, though.
That probably is.
Yes.
That's probably the reason, yes.
Maybe the Mexicans and Spanish would notice a bit more.
Yeah, I suppose they would, because they didn't have to pay attention.
There was a few scenes Rodriguez himself said that you can see slightly out of sync.
Again, if I watched it back and just focused on that, I would notice it this time round.
But interestingly, with this cost cutting, the way he uses the camera as a cutting tool itself, rather than waiting, because they didn't have the money to shoot like masters, close up. So what they would do is you'd film a single scene, and then they would stop. They would film a tiny portion of it, then zoom in on it, and there's your close-up. Zoom back out, and then there's your master.
Did he would film a bit, and he would freeze it, and then move,
and
it gave the illusion that there was multiple cameras at play.
Yeah, well, he's essentially cutting the scene in camera, rather than getting a shitload of coverage, and then sorting it out in the editing room. Yeah, he's essentially editing on the go.
He couldn't afford to film tons of footage and then cut it down here to make do with what he had. And as we'll get to later, a lot of his editing techniques were done to salvage scenes where maybe an actor flooded the lines or something went wrong. He was essentially saving the film in the edit.
Well, talking about editing techniques, filming techniques, you can see the groundwork being laid here for his mainstream career, can't you? Just on a much lower budget. Essentially
because he's basically a one-man film crew, isn't he?
Yeah,
he's doing all the stuff himself.
Oh, he made a making-of type book, and I wish I remembered what it was called. Rebel
Without a Crew.
That's the one.
It was like how a 23-year-old made a movie that grossed $1 million, something like that.
Well, I think he was 24 when he made this, wasn't he?
24, was it?
24.
Oh, I'm sure
because I think he was still a university student.
Oh, that wouldn't have surprised me. Yeah. He was studying at the time, but he was like, "Screw it, I'm going to go off and make a movie."
Well, they say just making a film is the best film school in itself because you learn the mistakes.
Yeah.
You learn how to rectify them, and you're picking up the technique as you go.
It's like anything, you screw up and you think, right, I'll not do that next time. But I have to say, for the limited budget he had, I think he did a fantastic job learning on the job, as you say.